Sometime this month, you're going to get paid, and before that money ever reaches your account, a piece of it is already gone. Income tax, taken straight out of the paycheck before your hands ever touch it. That's the deal you live under. You earn, and you're taxed on what you earn. It feels like a law of nature, but in 2007, the richest man in America did something that sounds impossible. He grew his fortune by billions of dollars and paid the federal government zero income tax. Not a little, nothing. And then, in 2011, he did it again. He broke no laws, he hid nothing. He simply understood a strategy so simple, it fits into 3 short words. So here's the question this whole video is about. How does a billionaire never seem to run out of money, buying jets, mansions, entire companies, while barely paying any tax at all? And how does a nurse or a teacher on an ordinary salary end up handing over 20, even 30% of everything they make? The answer is not some secret offshore island. It's a plain, almost boring truth about how wealth actually works. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Start with a fact that sounds like a mistake. Most billionaires have almost no income. For years, Jeff Bezos set his own salary at Amazon at around $80,000, less than many of the people packing boxes in his warehouses. Warren Buffett pays himself $100,000. That's it. So how are they worth hundreds of billions? Because their wealth isn't a paycheck, it's stock, shares of the companies they own. And those shares quietly climb year after year. And now the single most important rule in this entire story. In America, you are not taxed when your stock goes up. You are taxed only when you sell it, when you turn those paper gains into real money. Tax law calls that a realized gain. So a billionaire who simply never sells is, in the eyes of the tax system, barely earning a thing. The fortune grows, the tax bill doesn't. Think about what that means next to your own life. A nurse earns a wage, and every 2 weeks, the government takes its cut before she is even handed the check. A billionaire's fortune can climb by $1 billion in a single morning, and the tax on that growth is exactly nothing, as long as he doesn't sell. One of them is taxed on money she has earned. The other is untouched on money he has merely made. You might be thinking, so why not just tax the gains as they grow? It's a real debate, and a genuinely hard one. How do you tax a fortune that only exists on paper, one that a crash next Tuesday could cut in half? So for now, the rule holds. No sale, no tax. In 2021, a newsroom called ProPublica obtained something no one outside the government had ever seen: the actual tax returns of the richest Americans, going back years. The numbers were staggering. Over 5 years, Jeff Bezos' wealth grew by $99 billion, and he paid less than 1% of it in income tax. Warren Buffett's true tax rate came to 0.1%, the lowest of them all. And in one of the years he paid nothing, Bezos even claimed a $4,000 tax credit, the kind meant to help working parents. But this leaves an obvious hole in the plan. You cannot buy a yacht with shares you refuse to sell. Sooner or later, you need real cash to live on. So how do they spend? Without selling, without ever triggering that tax. In the 1990s, a tax law professor at the University of Southern California named Edward McCaffrey gave the trick a name. 3 words: buy, borrow, die. You've just seen buy. Own things that grow and never pay them out. The second word is where the magic happens. Borrow. Instead of selling his stock, a billionaire walks into a bank and pledges it as collateral. The bank hands back cash, millions, sometimes billions, secured against those shares. There's even a name for the product: a securities-backed line of credit. And here is the heart of the whole machine. A loan is not income. You have to pay it back. So the government does not tax it at all. This is not hypothetical. Elon Musk, who himself paid zero federal income tax in 2018, has pledged more than 200 million of his Tesla shares to banks as collateral. Larry Ellison, who founded Oracle, has pledged around 30% of his stake, backing something like $21 billion in loans. The interest on that borrowed money can run as low as 2 to 5%, cheaper than a home loan, and a fraction of the 20% tax they'd owe if they simply sold. So they don't sell, they borrow, again and again, and it gets better for them. When the first loan comes due, they don't cash out to repay it. They take a second loan, larger than the first, because by then, the stock is worth even more. The old debt is swallowed by the new. Roll that forward for decades, and a billionaire can fund an entire life of jets and mansions on borrowed money, having sold almost nothing, having paid almost nothing. The fortune just keeps climbing behind them, quietly, untouched. Which brings us to the strangest word in the list, die. Because the loans don't vanish, the debt keeps growing, and it has to be repaid someday. And someday, of course, everyone does die. Here is the dark joke buried inside the tax code. Dying is the greatest tax break of all. When you die, your heirs inherit your stock, and its taxable value quietly resets to whatever it's worth on that day. Every dollar of growth you dodge tax on while alive simply disappears. Tax lawyers call it the stepped-up basis. Your estate sells just enough shares to pay off the loans, now with almost nothing left to tax, and passes the rest to your children. The gains were never taxed once, and now they never will be. And the children inherit more than the money. They inherit the machine. The same shares, the same borrowing, the same quiet reset waiting at the end of their own lives. The fortune doesn't just survive death. It uses death to start over, clean, one generation after another. There's an old word for a debt bound to death, and it's been hiding in plain sight your whole life. Mortgage. It comes from Old French, mort meaning dead, and gage meaning pledge. Literally, a death pledge. A bargain that only truly ends when someone dies. 600 years later, the richest people alive have turned that grim little idea into a machine for keeping fortunes whole. Buy, borrow, die. And the tax dies right along with them. And here's the part that's hardest to accept. None of this is a loophole. No one is sneaking around in the dark. The system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It taxes income. Billionaires have simply arranged their lives to have almost none of it. Added everything up, the 25 richest Americans had watched their combined wealth grow by $401 billion in just 5 years. Together, they paid $13.6 billion in federal income tax. That works out to a true tax rate of 3.4%. Michael Bloomberg's came to 1.3%, and in a single year, all 25 of them, combined, reported wages of just $158 million, a rounding error against their fortunes. Now compare that to you. The typical American household pays a federal tax rate of around 14%, many times what the billionaires paid, on a sliver of the wealth. And your share is withheld from your paycheck before the money ever lands. You never even get the option to not have income. That is the quiet asymmetry at the center of it all. The more your money looks like a wage, the more it gets taxed. The more it looks like an asset, the more it slips straight through. So, sometime this month, when you get paid, and the tax is already gone before you even see the number, remember what the richest people in the world almost never get: a paycheck. They don't earn the way you earn. They buy, they borrow, and one day, they die, and the debt and the tax die quietly along with them. The real question was never how billionaires make their money. It's why, unlike the rest of us, they almost never have to give any of it back.